In our second panel, why don't you come on up to the stage. Our moderator for the second panel is Jonathan Katz. Jonathan is a resident fellow with the German Marshall Fund of the United States. And before he joined the German Marshall Fund, Jonathan was the Deputy Assistant Administrator for Europe and Eurasia with the Agency for International Development. Thank you, Jonathan. And panel, come on up.
Please. Minister could sit right here, and then Brock next to him, and then I think we're going to put you all the way at the end. Right here. Great. And then also Christian right here. Yes, I'm changing right.
You tell us where.
Okay, and then Minister, please sit right here. Thanks. Sorry, we're changing the choreography a little bit. Thank you. Please sit down. Great. Well, thank you so much. We have this great panel here this morning. The first panel was really great. And first, I want to thank USAID, also the Heritage Foundation, as well as the Georgian Embassy and government for being able to join you here this morning. And I was a little, listening to the first panel, I couldn't help but notice that the topic of the second panel, which is economics, was focused on by the foreign minister, who has, I know, a great interest and background in economics as well. So it was good to hear some of those topics already discussed. What we're going to do, obviously, today, and I thought Luke did a magnificent job just as a moderator, but also just bringing into current context the U.S.-Georgian relationship, but also looking historically at U.S.-Georgian relations and some of the challenges that Georgia is facing from both the security, the political, but also economic as well. And the panel that we're having today is going to focus on how do we grow the U.S.-Georgian economic relations, but we also have a leading official from the European Union, from DG NEAR, Christian Danielson here, who is deeply engaged with the Georgian government in support of its efforts to fulfill DCFTA and association agreement. And I think we all would agree that Georgia has been a model for economic reform in its region, but also globally. Interestingly enough, every year I look at the World Bank index, the Ease of Doing Business Index, and I think every single year Georgia's always sort of top ranked, and I think they can't go any further. And every year they kind of go one step further, and I think in this year is in the top 10, I think number 9 globally. And I think that's really a testament to the work of the government, to partners that are sitting here from State Department, from the EU, from USAID. And Mr. Minister, obviously your leadership as well at keeping Georgia on the right path, looking forward, being strategic. And I think there was a lot of discussion in the first panel about NATO, but there's also interest on your end in other agreements, some that you've been involved in the past, including some of Georgia's trade relations. I think Georgia's overall FTAs and other trade arrangements include over $2 billion.
2.3.
2.3, thank you. Correcting me. So you can see Georgia really is at a geostrategic crossroads economically. And I think part of what you're looking at, what your government is looking at, and the Georgian people, is how do you build on the success that you're having? How do you strengthen economic inclusivity within Georgia? How do you tackle some issues that remain, including unemployment issues? In fact, some of the same issues that we face globally. But Georgia is in an enviable position based on its resources. I think it was mentioned Georgian wines, tourism, energy, crossroads, Silk Road. If you go down the list, Georgia is really in an amazing space to be in right now, faces challenges. With Brock here, hopefully an opportunity to talk about some of the areas, and Christian to talk about some of the reforms but areas, tough spaces. And I know that we're also, not only is this the centennial of independence, but also it's the 10-year anniversary of the war that took place and Russian aggression. And I think the remarkable part of that is the progress that's been made after that war took place, which your government deserves a lot of credit for really creating that success. But I think it's really the issue of resiliency and how you've taken a situation with the support of Western allies like the United States, like the EU, to support that transition. And so I just wanted to, while we're here today, not only to talk about the steps that need to be taken, but also to reflect on what success has been so far. And hopefully we can step back. And I will just say that as a congressional staffer at that time, in 2008, we were part of a group of bipartisan members of staff and members of Congress that supported, I think it was $1 billion in assistance to Georgia.
Altogether from 4.4.
Okay. I mean, that came in quickly, and I think that really highlights the commitment that's been made, not including the resources that have come after that or the resources from the EU as part of this association agreement in DCFTA. And so I really want to turn to each one of our speakers right now for an opening statements. And Mr. Minister, you've been the minister since 2016, and first deputy prime minister since 2016, and then also the Minister of Economy and Sustainable Development since 2017. You also were vice mayor of Tbilisi, I think, which really shows that you know how to roll up your sleeves at the local level to get things done, which is critical when you talk about local development, SMEs. Brock, I know you're going to talk a little bit about the support that's provided on that end, but we really appreciate your leadership. To your left is Brock Bierman, who was sworn in on January 8th as the Assistant Administrator for USAID's Bureau for Europe and Eurasia. Also just brings an amazing amount, both private sector experience and public sector experience, even served locally in Rhode Island in the State House there as well, but also at FEMA, Department of Interior, has started up several businesses of your own. Having you here today is great because I think you bring the sensibilities of someone who's been both in and out of government and now is overseeing the USAID's portfolio overall in Europe and Eurasia, but also Georgia specifically, and are co-chairing the Economic Working Group, which is part of this overall strategic partnership effort. To your left is Christian Danielson, who I know quite well for working with you closely at USAID, who was appointed Director General for Enlargement at the European Commission in Brussels, and has been in this position since 2015. This Director General for Neighborhood and Enlargement Negotiations, which really is an incredibly large and challenging portfolio. We were talking earlier before we came in, and if I could quote you as saying that Georgia has been a star pupil in its efforts to integrate further with the EU, but also into Euro-Atlantic institutions. And we really look forward to hearing your thoughts on where Georgia stands. And then maybe I might ask a more delicate question of the future of EU enlargement and where that stands, especially for a country like Georgia, which was said earlier. If Georgia isn't as ready as any country for NATO, I don't know who is, but I could say the same thing for EU membership. Certainly they have ways to go, but they're really making a great deal of progress. And what does light look like at the end of the tunnel for Georgia, even though I know that's a sensitive question. And last but not least, Pete Millard, who is the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Europe and Eurasia Bureau, also was ambassador, I think it was Tajikistan, also Consul General in Morocco, Casablanca, which is a wonderful post, and also served as a DCM in Astana. And we want to thank you for being here, obviously to focus on a lot of what was said earlier with Fiona Hill and Robert Karam as well, focusing on the strategic relationship. Obviously, there's a lot of interest here in this room and others on how do you build a really strong relationship, how do you take it to the next level. One of the topics of discussion certainly to come up is what type of trade arrangements, if there can be, between Georgia and the United States. Where do things stand, and how do we build on what we've created and worked on for the last, really after over 25 years to strengthen this partnership. So I want to obviously get to everyone in the audience as well for questions and, and to really delve and jump really into this conversation. Mr. Minister, can I ask you to make the opening statement?
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you very much. I would like to thank the U.S. Institute of Peace and Heritage Foundation, as well as the Georgian Embassy in U.S. To make this gathering happen. Thank you very much, all the guests who are coming today. So we had a very useful, I think, that panel on the first session, and we already discussed all security issues, and you give me a lot of thoughts to explain what's going on in our country, what happened, how we increased the resilience of our country, and where we are right now in relation with the United States today. So just to give you a small facts, with the United States today we have some 308 million United States trade turnover, from which around 260 million is the import from the United States, and 120 million is the export from Georgia. Mostly the imports from the United States are the cars and medicaments and other products from Georgia. It's a ferroalloys and other commodities which we export to the United States. But what we see that the potential between our two countries is much more, and we see that the potential which we need to utilize should be pushed to start the talks about the free trade agreement. So yesterday I had a very good meeting with the Secretary Ross, and I delivered to him hand in hand the survey which we asked to do the PricewaterhouseCoopers about the free trade agreement, how it can affect on the Georgia's and United States trade turnover, and the numbers are quite good. So if the United States and Georgia will have the free trade agreement in place, the trade turnover in the next 5 years will increase from this 300 million up to 1.5 billion, and from this 1.5 billion, around 1 billion will be the export from the United States, and around 500 million will be the export from Georgia to the United States. So it's a benefit from the United States as well as in the benefits from the Georgia. For sure, there is a question if today we are the balance positive if the United States is a balance positive to the Georgia, why we would like to have such kind of free trade agreement. And there are a lot of spillover effects for sure, which we are looking for. And the biggest spillover is the foreign direct investment. For Georgia, the foreign direct investment is very important source of income, as well as the technology transfer, the knowledge sharing and experience. As we all know from literature as well as from our experience, that as soon as we have the free trade agreement in place with some countries, the foreign direct investment comes and the companies enter to the country freely. So today around 278 companies which are established using the United States capital are operating on the territory of Georgia, and they are quite active. We have American Chamber of Commerce who is quite active in our country, and the American society is growing, and we see that the commercial interest of United States is increasing year by year in the region. So not in the Georgia, but in the Caucasus as well as in the Central Asia. We see that the United States companies investing a lot on the Central Asia countries, and we see the new open up on the Uzbekistan. We know that only in the Kazakhstan, United States companies investing around 50 billion. And this is mostly in the gas and oil sector. And when we are talking about the gas and oil sector, you need to take this gas and oil from Kazakhstan or from Uzbekistan, other resources or merchandising goods, and then transfer it to the Europe or to US. And to do it, you need to find the shortest and more safest route. And the shortest and most safest route is for Georgia, is via Georgia. So this is the route from let's say, the Kazakhstan, using the Kazakhstan ports, then the Caspian Sea, then there's Azerbaijan, and then via Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Black Sea ports, and Black Sea, or via Georgia, then to the Turkey and to the Europe. So, and we're investing a lot on that direction. And the last year, economic growth in Georgia was quite good. So we had some 5% GDP growth last year. And the estimation from the International Monetary Fund in the beginning was just 3.5%. We argued a lot. So at that time, by the way, I was the Minister of Finance. And I argued a lot with the International Monetary Fund that 3.5% is too small. And we will get 4%. And we entered to the Parliament with our budget to estimation of the 4%. And finally, we get 5%. So this year we agreed on 4.8% GDP growth, but the first quarter is 5.2% GDP growth. And I think that we will finalize around 5.5 to 5.7% GDP growth. And this growth mostly coming from let's say, the investment, the consumption, as well as the net export, but based on the structural reforms which we implemented in our country the last years, and we will still continue to implement the structural reforms which are very important. So last year what we did, we tackled the several very important problems. You mentioned what kind of challenges do we have and how we increase the resilience. So the last year was the very important year. So one of the biggest challenge in our economy is the current account deficit. 2016, we finalized 12.6% current account deficit, which is huge. But this current account deficit was covered from the foreign direct investment. But last year, we finalized 8.7% current account deficit, which is for 4% less than what was in 2016. And in nominal number, it means around 500 million less than what we have in 2016. And how we do it? For sure, we sell much more products and services outside of the country, which means that our export increased by 28% 2017, and we sell a lot of our products outside the country, but as well we sell a lot of our services, like tourism. So tourism increased dramatically, and we experienced around 28% increase on the tourism generation. So when we are revenues from the tourism, it reached around 2.75 billion. So just to compare all the goods what we sell, excluding re-export, is 2.8 billion, and the generation from the tourism is 2.75 billion. So it's around the equal what we have from all other our export. But when we're talking about the trade turnover of the Georgia, so you should tell me when I should stop, because
keep going.
Okay.
This is great.
Okay. When we're talking about the trade turnover, so the whole trade turnover of Georgia is around 10.7 billion. From this 10.7 billion, 2.7 billion, as I mentioned, this is the export, including the re-export, and some 8 billion is the import in our country. From this 8 billion import, what we imported to our country, around 2.2 billion we importing from the European Union. And right now I want to touch the relation with the European Union and what we are doing there. So starting from 2014, as soon as we became the associated members of the European Union, the trade turnover increased dramatically. So at the same day we signed the Deep and Comprehensive Free Trade Agreement. So the two directions, the one direction is that we should harmonize all our legislation with the European Union, which means that the living standards in our country will increase, that the law enforcement will increase, all necessary, let's say, legislation will be implemented, et cetera, but at the same time, what we see that today the European Union supports the Georgian development a lot. And I think that the Director General will, in his speech, then talk about what kind of support do we have from European Union. But what I would like to mention that today we have around 2.8 billion trade turnover with European Union and only 380 million trade turnover with United States. And what we would like to see, the increase of the trade turnover with the United States. So to go a little bit further on the current account deficit and to strengthen the resilience of the country. So last year we implemented the several reforms which we called the growth-friendly fiscal reforms. Under these growth-friendly fiscal reforms, we fully changed the corporate profit tax modality. And right now in Georgia, the corporates are taxed on the profit only in case of the distribution of the dividends. So what it gives, in the final, it gives around 130% increase on the reinvestment rate. And if usually in Georgia we have the reinvestment around 300 million, last year we had 722 million reinvestment, which means that the companies who has 10% or more the foreign capital, they reinvested their money in Georgia's economy, don't withdraw as a dividends. So from other hand, we increase the indirect taxation like excise taxes on tobacco, on the cars, on the fuel, which for sure limit the imports from outside. But at the same time, what we did, we increased the capital spendings and we decreased the current spending. So altogether, these all measures increase the resilience of the economy and helps to increase the savings in the economy, which is very, very important to Georgia's economy. Just as an example, so the government savings was 2.5% to GDP, and they should increase up to 6% to GDP on the 2020. So so I am the politician. Are you a politician right now?
I will keep my remarks short.
Oh, okay. But we all know how much important when you promise to your citizens something in the pre-election period. So what is good to happen right now in Georgia that in the pre-election period in 2016, we elaborated the 4-pillar reform agenda. So, and what is good that this 4-pillar reform agenda, which is about the education, about the special development, which means that improving the core infrastructure of country. This is about the economic reforms, and one of them I just described, and this is about the open governance. So all these reforms are already embodied on the midterm budget, which means that we already know how and where we should find the money to and sources to get all this reform until 2021 and supported by the International Monetary Fund and all IFIs, which means that what we promise to our citizens will be delivered. In that direction, for sure, the international society support to Georgia is very important. And in this case, I would like to particularly mention the USAID support, and I would like to thank you, sir, for your continuous support during the last 25 years. And I have a very, very big case of describing of USAID support in our country. And honestly, even right now, we have support in particularly all direction of the sectoral economy. So we have support on the rural development, we have support on the energy direction, we have support on the democracy building, we have support on the society building. So a lot of support which we get from the USAID, and I'm very thankful to USAID on that support. So I think that for my first intervention, I am okay.
Thank you.
Starting from the next round, I will go deeper. Thank you very much.
Mr. Minister, thank you. I think you highlighted really positive growth numbers. I know the IMF, there was I think a staff visit in April that went quite well. I think their forecast was really upbeat. Hopefully you haven't stolen all the thunder from Brock, but I think you were right to point out the importance of U.S. support, USAID, and then also mentioning several of the sectors and business enabling environment, of course, is important. So I'm going to turn it over to Brock to talk about that, but also sort of USAID ongoing effort, but also looking ahead. And the good note here in Washington, too, is that these resources are, both in terms of the administration and Congress, are well supported, and a lot of discussions about foreign assistance. But one thing that has remained constant across the political spectrum in Washington has been this great deal of support for assistance to Georgia to support the type of projects and efforts that you talked about in Brockville as well.
Well, thank you very much, Jonathan. And I want to take an opportunity to thank the panel for being here today. I would like to thank the Heritage Society and the Institute for Peace. This is a very important opportunity to have a dialogue, to have a discussion about the future of our partnership and the exciting things that are going on in Georgia. I just got back from spending actually almost a week in Georgia. And you know, in as much as we see the changes incrementally when you live in Georgia. I hadn't been back to Georgia since 2006, so it was tremendous just to look at the skyline, right, when you land. But my first visit was back in 1999, in fact. I will tell you my love affair, if you will, with Georgia has gone back almost 25 years by itself. And you look at some of the changes that have gone on, just not with the skyline, but whether it's the infrastructure, whether it's just walking down Main Street, you see a real change, a progressive change, one that's very positive, and we're looking forward to continuing that important partnership that we have with Georgia. And I think that starts with dialogue. One of the things that I have been impressed with since returning to USAID after almost a 10-year hiatus, if you will, is the working groups that I have actually now participated now in two, just recently with the Democracy Working Group and also with the Economic Working Group back in March. And this is an open dialogue where you can have a frank discussion and you can learn about what's important. And frankly, what I've learned is that business is open in Georgia. I think that's a very key, important aspect. You mentioned earlier in your remarks that Georgia is the number 9th in doing business, but they are also the 16th, according to the Heritage Foundation, in economic freedom. And I think those are really two very important key economic figures. As I look back over the last 20 years, just again, I've seen a tremendous amount of change. But during my 2 weeks, or I'm sorry, during my 1 week in Georgia, I had a chance to get up to Anaclea. And I think that, just to mention the seaport, albeit that A, doesn't have any direct correlation with the actual seaport itself, we're doing actual programs around the port and helping create small business opportunities for businesses, of which I also visited. But let me just say, you know, you've got a $2.5 billion infrastructure program going on with that infrastructure, with a port. That's a real game changer. They're going to create something that is not just impactful for the country, but the entire region. And looking out throughout Anaclea and visiting, actually going right to the seaport and talking to the people who are involved with the project and seeing their vision. They're very passionate, and they've got a very aggressive timeline. I mean, they're talking about getting their first container in the first quarter of next year. And if that happens, there's going to be a lot of positive things that are going on. But even still, if you look at the long-term plans for Anaclea, it's tremendous. It's going to help Georgia throughout that entire region. Just talking about a few more things, because I do want to keep my remarks somewhat short because again, I know we're going to have a little bit of a question and answer, and I'm looking forward to having a little bit more back and forth. But I think in the ag sector, I think it's worth noting USAID has heavily invested in the ag sector, and since in 2017, our programs have trained 190,000 people. We've facilitated credit for more than 78,000 farms. We've generated $56 million in new gross sales and leveraged investments of $11.6 million. Our programs have created a legacy of strong self-sustainability and commercial institutions, including 29 farm centers, 24 food processing facilities, 10 cold storage facilities, 6 primary producers, and 1 testing lab, providing 370,000 rural household, 370, I'm sorry, and I hate to read for these things, but I think the statistics in this case are very important, and those statistics show you how far Georgia has gone. We're looking forward to working with Georgia as a partner. We're excited to be part of its future. We also understand that there are some stumbling blocks along the way. One of those stumbling blocks, if you will, or actually problematic issues in the ag sector is the marmoladed stink bug, right? So I think some of you have heard about that, and I actually, the stink bug, to be short. It's the brown marmorated. What did I say? Marmalade. Marmorated. Right. I was thinking marmalade, right? But the marmorated stink bug. I'll just keep it at stink bug. But honestly, it's a huge devastation, and I believe they've lost between $40 and $50 million in the last season. I visited a couple of farms while I was in Georgia, and it has destroyed entire crops. It's been very devastating. And we're actually working with them to solve this problem. We launched a $3 million effort just recently while I was in Georgia to help them fight this scourge. We're actually working with an American company in a small town in Oklahoma where they're actually producing the traps to help fight this effort or this problem. And so we're looking at a number of levels to help Georgia, not just on the ag sector, but in the energy sector as we have in the past. And we'll continue to look to Georgia as an important strategic partner in the area. As we know, they are in a very, very important strategic area, and we're looking forward to working with them. So thank you.
Brock, thank you. And I think you highlighted that support and continued support for Georgia's economy and a longstanding relationship and the success, too, in specific sectors. Maybe I can turn, Christian, to you now to talk about the EU side of this. And obviously, one of the things I wanted to point out, too, is that the U.S. and the EU have a tremendous amount of cooperation on the ground, both between the embassies, but also with your team out there as well, representatives in USAID. And I think that has been invaluable to the work that's been taking place, support for Georgia. And I know that with both of you sitting next to each other, that work will continue. But maybe you could speak to the EU side of this and also some of the progress that you see Georgia has made.
Thanks a lot. Thank you, Jonathan. And thank you for arranging this, those who have arranged it, and giving this an opportunity to discuss this issue. It is essential. And as you said at the beginning, Georgia is the star. And that is true when we look on the transition that has taken place over the last 10, 15 years. It is impressive. The previous speakers mentioned the various indexes that show that this is a country which is doing extremely well when it comes to business environment and improvements. It's also interesting how well Georgia has done when it comes to open society, indexes about transparency, which is a sign of the efficiency that they have put into fighting issues such as corruption. So all of that are good things. And I think that one reason why this has been so successful is because the vision from Georgia has been the Euro-Atlantic integration, and where the relation to the EU has played a very important role. Why? Because this association agreement and the awful DCFTA, as Deep and Comprehensive Free Trade Agreement in terms of term, that one has provided a fairly good roadmap for reforms. A roadmap for reforms not only when it comes to the trade issue, but also into various other areas, and Minister, you mentioned it. We can see already now how that has affected trade, which has increased substantially, as was mentioned. But it has also provided the necessary environment for direct investments. Those who invest can be fairly sure that the investments will be well taken care of, and therefore they can take the risk of doing the investment. And I think we have seen that development as well. So all that is good and quite impressive, and I would like to commend the government and the measures that and the energy that they're putting into these issues. Now, that being said, of course, there is a need to continuously look into how this can further be improved. And the minister pointed to that you have a very ambitious reform program underway on education, on also addressing the issue of the urban and rural divide, which is essential, but also when it comes to structural reforms of the economy. And there are some issues which we are looking into now in particular. One is the issue of, shall we call it commercial justice, where there is not so much that you can't get it, but it's just that the issue is to strengthen the instruments and the infrastructure for it. And the other one, which is very important, is to look into the financial sector and see to that can develop even further. Measures are underway. We are very much involved in it. And it's a pleasure to point to that for this whole period of reforms, of transition, EU has been very actively involved in supporting. And we are running right now at the level of 120 million in grants, euro, on a yearly basis. We have also provided, in addressing the macro-financial situation, macro-financial stability, support. Just recently, we have agreed on another 45 million. And we have done it in a number of areas. So it has been supporting judicial reform, it has been supporting rural development. Right now, very much focusing on small and medium-sized enterprises and seeing to that the industry and those who are active in the economy in Georgia can draw the full benefit of the free trade agreement. The reality is that Georgia, when the association agreement and the deep and comprehensive free trade agreement have been fully implemented, which will be fairly soon, will for all practical purposes, be able to be on the European market, the 500 million market, with its products. So that is what we're also focusing on very much, and we are focusing on infrastructure. And in terms of instruments, we have found it quite interesting to work on issues such as how to provide financing for small and medium-sized enterprises. And that has to do with the banking sector that has not been fully geared up for that kind of purpose. We are now looking into how can we get more of local currency credits out on the market. It is, of course, a big risk for an actor in the Georgian economy to take loans in dollars or in euros when he's actually working on the local market. So we're looking into that one, and we're looking on the major infrastructure elements. And there we have an interesting project which I would like to mention, and that is a new approach when it comes to infrastructure. We have been working very hard with blending arrangements within national financial institutions. And what we now are moving into is much more of guarantees. Naming what this is about is trying to tap the capital market in a broader sense for the interesting projects that are out there in Georgia. And it is within the context of something called the external investment plan that we are putting lots of efforts into. And I think we are going to see quite a lot of possibilities in Georgia. Let me finally say 2 words about the regional element. One thing is the regional hub that Georgia has all the potential, has already become, and has all the potential to become even much more. That goes for transport when it comes to the One Belt, One Road, but it goes very much also when it comes to energy. And I'm thinking of the Tana pipeline, I'm thinking of other pipelines where Georgia's role is essential. But Georgia also plays an important role when it comes to the regional cooperation between those countries who are within what we call the Eastern Partnership. That is Armenia, that is Azerbaijan, that's Georgia, that is also Ukraine, Moldova, and Belarus. And there they have created together a cooperation which we are supporting very much, which has to do with helping experiences on governance and how to become better at that, on how to make the economy more competitive, on how to see to that infrastructure can actually happen, and finally, and also to see to how people can be more engaged and have more happen there, and Georgia plays an important role in that context as well. I think I'll stop here.
Great. Christian, thank you, and I think it highlighted both the work that Georgia has done as the star pupil, but also some new opportunities. And you mentioned DCFTA and AA and association agreement, something that Georgia is moving really closer to fulfilling its obligations, which is significant. And then how do you build on that? And obviously access to 500 million people in the European market is critical. I think one of maybe the dirty secrets here too is that underlying this association agreement efforts is strong U.S. support for Georgia to implement this agreement and these agreements going forward. And I think that's really an area of great cooperation and importance to Georgia. And I've seen that in the agriculture sector before, where the U.S. has played an important role in USAID and the State Department. Elisabeth, can I turn to you to fill in sort of this picture on the U.S. side and the strategic economic partnership and how you're looking at it, how the State Department looks at it. Obviously, it was a great, I thought, a great opening session with the Secretary of State and Georgian Prime Minister, which focused in part on economics as security. And how do we look at that? Georgia and the United States, this relationship has grown so much over the past 2 decades. Really, Georgia is a key ally and partner. We talked a little bit before even coming here about the sacrifice that Georgian soldiers have made. But how do you see that going forward, and how do we fill in this picture and move this relationship to the next level?
Well, thank you so much. And again, it's a pleasure to be here this morning with this very distinguished panel, and I want to thank the organizers so much for pulling this important event together. Many of the things I will say will repeat what we've already heard, but maybe from a slightly different angle. And we are reflecting now on this milestone of Georgia. And we agree, of course, that Georgia has emerged as a democratic leader in the region and has embarked on an ambitious economic program that has already shown impressive results, as we've heard. And all the while, as Georgia has been making these great strides, the United States and America and Georgia have cultivated a deep and enduring partnership based on a joint commitment to democratic values and global security. And yes, it's with particular gratitude that I note Georgia's contributions to the Resolute Support Mission in Afghanistan. We're deeply grateful for your sacrifices. No discussion of Georgia will be complete without acknowledging Russia's occupation of the Georgian territories of Abkhazia and South Ossetia, as well as its broader efforts to destabilize Georgia. So I want to take this opportunity to reaffirm our support for Georgia's independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders. I want to commend the government's peace initiative that is before the Parliament and which contains numerous proposals to encourage trade and personal connections across the administrative boundary lines. Despite this occupation, Georgia experiences economic growth. And we believe the steady economic progress Georgia is currently experiencing and its rising rankings, we heard them, it's currently 9th in the world Bank Ease of Doing Business report, are tributes to sound economic principles. My government continues to support the Prime Minister's focus on economic growth, including his 4-point plan to improve education, invest in infrastructure, streamline taxation and governance structures, and implement judicial reform. Our economic strategy is tied to our support of Georgia as a prosperous and democratic nation, one that is making progress on its Euro-Atlantic goals. In cooperation with the government, other donors, and civil society, we are focused on strengthening institutions and the rule of law framework, increasing bilateral trade and investment, utilizing targeted economic assistance, and supporting regional economic cooperation. So I want to recognize also today not only Georgia's contributions to European security and its role as a regional anchor for advancing democratic reform and economic reform, but also as a former ambassador to Tajikistan, I know that Georgia has a unique potential to help further expand trade and commercial ties across the South Caucasus, Central Asia, and beyond to Europe and East Asia. I'd like to just briefly touch on two key issues: Georgia's contribution to European security, the important connection between the rule of law and economic growth, and Georgia's potential to help unlock greater regional prosperity. On the first one, I think it's important at the outset to place Georgia within the context of broader US strategy towards Europe, which asserts that a strong and free Europe is in the United States' vital interest. As the President made clear in the National Security Strategy, Russia's subversion and aggression are threatening this vision, seeking to undermine confidence in Western ideals and weaken credibility of our commitment to transatlantic unity, European governments and institutions. This is a reality that Georgia understands all too well. In addition to Russia's subversion, we're also engaged in strategic competition with China. We cannot tackle these challenges on our own. We need a Georgian partner that's resilient, with strong institutions and rule of law, and growing economically. And this is why my country has provided Georgia with more than $4.5 billion in assistance since 1992. An investment we are continuing, most recently with this year's omnibus spending bill, which was signed by the President in March, which directs an allocation of $105 million US dollars of foreign assistance to Georgia. This assistance will help Georgia continue reforms and come closer to achieving its goals of integrating more closely in Euro-Atlantic institutions. On judicial reforms and economic growth, I'd like to talk about one institutional reform, which is judicial reform, an important part of the Prime Minister's platform. Georgia has successfully started a comprehensive justice sector reform, and it's critical to the public's confidence in institutions. As we already heard a little bit about, the private sector also must be confident that business deals and potential investment disputes will be handled in line with international best practices. Reforms that provide the private sector the ability to transparently adjudicate commercial cases needs to be part of Georgia's foundation of a vibrant economy. Georgia, with the assistance of the United States, is working on a system of commercial chambers that would bring more transparency and integrity to such cases. A commercial chamber would assure investors attracting new investment from abroad and retaining existing investors, which is critical to increasing economic growth. And we encourage the Georgian government to continue to focus on this important reform. We also continue to strongly support increased opportunities for US businesses in Georgia, including through our support for commercial exchange programs. We have a partnership with the Department of Commerce and with the America-Georgia Business Council, and we have brought 14 representatives of US companies to Tbilisi. We hope we'll have a similar mission in 2019, which will be yet another opportunity to strengthen economic ties with Georgia. And finally, Georgia as a regional leader, and you have an important regional role. Georgia's success in implementing democratic and economic reforms, as well as its openness to free trade and entrepreneurship, significantly enhances efforts to develop an economic corridor that links markets in the South Caucasus and Central Asia to Europe and China. Georgia's global approach to free trade is a smart way to attract new partners and investment. It will help Georgia develop as a stronger economic partner for the United States. Georgia has also taken steps alongside many of its neighbors to significantly increase investments in infrastructure, including several port projects, and we already heard about them, and efforts to improve road and rail networks. We heard about Anaklia Deep Sea Port, an effort by the Georgian government to help to build this deep sea port in the Black Sea. 2 US companies, the Conti Group and SSA Marine, will be involved in this development and construction and operation. Another US company, PACE, is in the process of expanding its operations in the port of Poti. By modernizing its port, road, and rail infrastructure, Georgia maximizes its own potential for foreign direct investment and creates new possibilities for trade. There's also significant regional value in energy sector. Georgia has provided a reliable transit state for the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan oil pipeline and for the Southern Gas Corridor, which will bring Caspian gas to Turkey this June and to Italy by 2020-21. This gas corridor will enhance European energy security, and it would not be possible without Georgia's cooperation and support. So through its embrace of reform and free trade infrastructure investment, support for European energy security, Georgia has created important political and economic opportunities for itself and for the broader region. You talked about a dirty little secret earlier. I have a little dirty secret too, and that is that I have never been to Georgia. And I may be the only person in this room who has never been into Georgia. But I will say, working in Kazakhstan and in Tajikistan, Georgia was very often held out as the model. Georgia had implemented the reforms, and these countries could see that it could be done. And so we often pointed to Georgia as the star, as we already heard. So I hope very much that in the near future I will have the opportunity to go and see for myself the wonderful progress you've made. With that, I will conclude my remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for those remarks. And I think you went through sort of just building on what Brock said, just this extraordinary cooperation that exists. And also, I'm glad you brought up justice sector reform. I know it's something that the EU looks at as well. And it's not about picking out one specific challenge. It's about creating the right type of business environment for Georgia, not only now but in the future. And I think it's something that all Western democracies struggle with to ensure that they remain market-oriented, democratic, and have the right infrastructure to attract investment. And that's something that is a lifelong endeavor for all countries to keep their markets open and transparent. If I could, and just open up with a quick question about Georgia as a regional hub, which was mentioned by almost, I think, all of the panelists as well. And I wanted to get a sense from you, building on what they have said. It was mentioned energy, obviously, and that's been something that Georgia has played a role for quite some time now. I also want to mention the importance of electrical grids, that Georgia plays an important role, and I know USAID, US government, and others have focused on between Armenia and Georgia, but also Turkey and Georgia as well, how important that is. But maybe if you could speak to that regional center, and both for European and American investors, what are the opportunities that you see? And also maybe speak to some of the challenges as well. You have important regional partners, some that Elisabeth was talking about, that look to Georgia as a model, that haven't quite made it to the point where they're necessarily as transparent or as focused on the right type of business enabling environment, and how we can best assist in that environment to support Georgia as a regional hub.
First of all, I would like to thank you all to encouraging us on our success in our reforms. And I would like to mention that the continuation of the reforms depending on the political will. So, and this is the utmost when you are implementing so many reforms during so many years. And what is good in our country that as soon as the government is committed to deliver some reform, we are delivering it. So, and there is no question. If we committed to do something, we do it, because we do believe that if we do something, we do it in benefit of our country, of our citizens, and it helps a lot. When we are talking about the sustainable growth of economy, it's very important to note that right now there is a clear understanding in the country that all reforms, all economic reforms, and I have a huge list. This is only the economic reforms which right now are undergone in our country. So all these reforms should help to the sustainable growth, and this is the most important. So the structural change of the country helps to be sure that you will get the success in many years in the future. When we're talking about the hub, this is also the part of the reform. So without the rate of corruption what we have in our country, without the rate of the criminal what we have in our country, we cannot become the hub in the region. And we are the most safest country in the broad region, so we're number 5 worldwide as a less criminal country among 125 countries, and by the corruption perception, we're number 46 among 190 countries. And I think that it helps a lot. It helps to attract the international companies as well, because if we're talking about to become a hub, to become a regional hub, you need to create the environment where all participants want to see themselves and to work there. And this is, I think, that's very important, because right now we are in the very competitive environment. So all countries want to become the hub. So all the countries have the ambitions to become a hub, and all of them are implemented some of reforms, but the geopolitical location as well as the political will with the government has right now, I think that helps a lot to implement such kind of reforms, which helps to attract many internationals to our country. So today, via Georgia, as it was already mentioned, the several pipelines goes, and today European Union will get around 24 BCM per year starting from 2019, and then it can even become more and more, so up to 30 billion BCM, only the TAP and TANAP. This is only one project which is extending it, and I think that what we have right now on the Central Asia as a resources, which should be delivered to the Europe, is very important to deliver on the shortest and safest route. And this is the Georgia, and this is via Georgia, and for sure we will do everything to have such projects in our country. So you mentioned and it was mentioned the transport corridors, and I would like to mention that we as a government and country are very active on the transport corridors. So there are the several corridors like a Trasica, like a Karek, like Lapis Lazuli, like a Black Sea Gulf corridor. So all these corridors finally concentrated on the Georgia and via Georgia to the European direction. And you mentioned the new Silk Road direction, and the middle corridor is also very important, and already we get a benefit from it. So a lot of companies right now are looking to that corridor. We get the new transport cargoes to that corridor. And it was mentioned that the Anaplia deep sea port will be constructed in the next few years. So it's already started, the construction is already started. So, and OPIC is right now considering to be the lender on that, on that port. And that, as it was mentioned, the SSA Marine, US port operator, as well as the Conti Group are there, which is very important for us. And altogether, it's 2.5 billion project. But at the same time, to even strengthen the transit capability of the country, we are investing a lot on the east-west highway and on the modernization on the Georgian railway, because you need the supplementary infrastructure, so only the port cannot work. You need the railway and you need the roads to deliver the goods to the port. So I think that altogether, the business environment, the political will, the investment on the infrastructure, altogether creates the hub which we would like to see the Georgia, and not only the hub on the transit, as I mentioned, for the goods, for the energy sources, but as well as for the business. So I think that the Georgia has the full potential to attract, as I mentioned, the international companies to have the headquarters there, and we see that right now, a lot of international financial institutions have the headquarters in our country and cover the region from our country. And I think that they feel themselves quite good in our country. And for sure, we will continue to support this direction. And the certified trade missions are very important from United States, because when you have the trade missions from United States, it increases the interest from United States to the country, and it gives you the opportunity to give to the companies the exact opportunity what you have in your country. And I would like to thank the Commerce Department. Last year we had the trade mission. I do hope that this year we will get another one. So, and it helps to make closer in Georgia and United States companies, because as I mentioned, around 270 companies are active right now in Georgia, but still we would like to see more and more United States companies in our country.
Why don't we do this? I know we have a lot of experts who are here, and I see someone from OPIC here, and maybe we'll turn to Meryl first to ask some questions, and just, if you can, just please identify yourself and let us know where you are from and who you represent.
Meryl Burpow, I'm Deputy VP of Investment Policy at OPIC, Overseas Private Investment Corporation. We are the U.S. Development Finance Institution. As many of you know, we've been active in Georgia, very active since the 1990s. I just came from Georgia, where we were doing an analysis of the broader outcomes, the impacts of our projects in Georgia, and we were really excited to see some of what has come out of that. We've supported everything from the Tbilisi Marriott to the new Moxie, the restaurants on the Funicular Hill, to Teliani, which is part of your new exporting to the U.S. And we were obviously very happy to see what our own investments were doing in terms of succeeding and growing. But one of the really interesting things we found in this analysis was that because of these investments that OPIC supported, there were over 300 small businesses created in Georgia to supply these entities, and thousands of people now working for those small businesses because they were able to supply some of these entities we supported. And I think it's really remarkable that what we were told over and over again is when these small companies are associated with a U.S. firm, whether it's Marriott or Wendy's or whatever, there is an understanding by potential clients that they are meeting international standards, they are dealing with environmental and social situations appropriately, and so they are then able to grow themselves because they are seen as very acceptable businesses for other people to work with. So I just wanted to comment that, you know, the impacts of what U.S. entities are doing there, the impacts supported by OPIC are huge. We are going to be involved, as you just mentioned, most likely in some of the infrastructure coming up. Our new Gazelle Fund is supporting a small well, not so small, cement company that'll be working on some of the infrastructure there. So I just would like to hear from anyone who wants to comment on sort of the downstream effects of the investments that U.S. government is supporting there. Thank you.
Thank you. Why don't we take a couple of questions and we'll pull them together. We have right up front.
Thank you for your comments. I'm Steve Powell, Managing Director of Sino Powell Capital. You all know what capital is. I'm Powell. Sino is a prefix meaning China. And I heard China mentioned for the first time by Elisabeth today. I think China needs to be discussed. I know this is not a China-Georgia conference, but still, I think it's a factor in any investments that people might want to make in Georgia. You're at the center of the Silk Road, and depending on what direction you go in, the Silk Road either starts or ends in China. And China has been making a lot of investments along the Silk Road. So I'd be interested to hear how you're coordinating interests from China and investments from China with interest and investments from the United States. Thank you.
Okay, we'll take one more.
Alex Millard, IHS Market. Thank you very much for your comments. Thank you, Minister, for your comments. Very informative, lots of data. I wanted to ask you a question that kind of cuts to the core of economic development in Georgia that has to do with unemployment. Georgia has been for years plagued by a fairly high degree of unemployment, and I was wondering if you can comment on that. And also related to this somewhat, can you please provide comments on the level of national debt and the level of hard currency and gold reserves? Thank you very much.
Great. Mr. Minister, do you want to tackle debt, unemployment?
Absolutely.
Easy issues. Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I can even show the charts. So I have all the charts with me. So first of all, thank you very much. I would like to thank the OPIC. OPIC is very active since 1992, and until now the OPIC invests in more than 50 projects, and the investment is more than 500 million. So what we know that even today the OPIC is considering to invest on 6 to 7 projects altogether, around 100 million. And I think that this is very important, and I would like to ask you to share your experience with USTR, because this is what we found in our research with the PricewaterhouseCoopers, that with increased trade with the United States, as soon as the free trade agreement will be there, around 22,000 jobs should be created in Georgia because of the spillover effect. So, and what we see that the multinationals, as soon as they enter to the country, they help to increase the standards on the SME. And this is very important. And we have the special program to support the SMEs on that direction to increase their capability to supply the goods and services to the multinationals. And as soon as the Marriott, Moxie, or other companies like that enter to the country, it helps a lot. And in that direction, I don't see that it can be the downside, so only the upside, what I see on the investment from the United States. So I would like to encourage and commend you to look at the projects, what you have in our country. You are quite active, and I think that two infrastructural projects, especially the Anaklia Deep Sea Port, as well as the expansion of the Pace terminal in the Poti Port, are very important. Both of them are infrastructural projects. Both of them strengthen the transit potential of the country. So, and it's really very important. You mentioned the Teliani Valley. So, and just for the information, the Teliani Valley is one of the best wine producer factory in our country, who owns the wine, the factory itself, as well as the vineyards, and they are selling the wine outside of the Georgia as well as in the United States. So what I remember by heart, last year they sell around 50 million bottles, which is really incredible. So it's really good company, and thank you OPIC to support. So the next question was about the China-Georgia relation and what's going on there. We have very good relation. In 2017, in the May, we signed the free trade agreement with China. So we was among the first countries who joined the initiative of, at that time, they called it Silk Road Initiative. And then they changed the name, and right now it's One Belt, One Road Initiative. In early 2015, we signed the cooperation with China. At the time, our Prime Minister was the Minister of Economy, and he signed with the Commerce Minister Chang at the time the agreement on the cooperation on the Silk Road, and it pushed the relation between our two countries. So in 2017, we signed the free trade agreement with China, and what we see a quite big increase in our trade relations. So right now, the trade turnover between Georgia and China is 970 million, from which around 200 million is export from Georgia and 700 million is the import from China. But what we see that the very important products like a Georgian wine increase dramatically in the Chinese market. So last 2 years, in 2016, we had some 85% growth. In 2017, we have same number. So Chinese market become number 3rd market by the volume of the Georgian wine, which we sell there, and by the price of the Georgian wine, they become number 2nd. And for sure, we will continue the trade with them, and because it's a huge market for us, and we would like to utilize this opportunity to trade with them. In regard of the investment, Chinese behind the United States for sure. Only in last 10 years, United States invest in our country around 800 million, and all investment of the Chinese in our country is around 350 million. But right now they are quite active. So they, from 4 industrial free trade zones, 2 belongs to them. One is in the Kutaisi, another is in the Poti, and they are quite active. So we can see in the future the activities of China, but we don't think that it can be a threat for us. So the visitors from China last year, we had some 14,000 people only, and from United States we had some 42,000 people. So I think that the United States is quite ahead in relation with China, but still we need to deepen and strengthen our relation in regard of the economic one. And for sure, the support what we get from United States is far ahead from relation what we have from China. But still, the initiative of the One Belt, One Road is very important. And why for Georgia is very important? Because there is 5 principles of coexistence, peaceful coexistence of the countries along the Silk Road, and these 5 principles are very important. The first principle is not interference of internal matters of the countries. The second principle is the respect of sovereignty and territorial integrity, etc., etc. But these two let's say, the principles are very important to us. So you know that we have the territorial problems. 20% of our territory is occupied, etc., etc. So, and not interference and sovereignty and territorial integrity is very important. The second thing is very important, that how we see the countries and the ability of the countries along the Silk Road, that the Georgia can be the complementary and can be the beneficial of the whole Silk Road. So we're not the competitors of the countries who has the gas and oil, so far away from it. So we don't have the gas, we don't have an oil. So the Azerbaijan and all other countries in the Central Asia, they are the gas and oil producers. We are not. If we look a little bit far away, on the Mongolia, on the China and other countries, so we are also not competitors. So we can provide, let's say, the very good platform to create some joint ventures, et cetera, but can be the complementary and find the synergies of it. So this is how we see it right now. I talked exact numbers of the visitors. I talked tell exact numbers of the investment and trade. But still, the Georgia is the relatively small country. So we are only 3.7 million citizens. So this is all the country, and the territory of the Georgia is all territory of the Georgia, including the occupied territories, is 70,000 square kilometers. And you cannot allow yourself, we don't have the luxury to be the protectionists. We don't have such kind of luxury because the country is too small. As soon as you will start the protectionism, it means the pressure on the inflation as well as the quality on the small country. So the only way to support the competitiveness of the country is the open up. And we're a very open economy right now. For sure, some part of the economy struggle from it. And for sure, the producers are all the time complaining that even with the European Union, as soon as we open up the one factory of the sugar producer is stopped. Mm-hmm. And 600 people right now are looking to the jobs. But still, we think that the government should think how the government can create the new jobs for that people, but not be the protectionist. So, and we are thinking right now to create the new sustainable way of new jobs in that region particularly, and maybe we will ask even the European Union to support us to create these new jobs, but for sure not to close the borders. And on that case, I would like to go to the unemployment. The unemployment is really huge. So, and if you are aware about the last data, because of the census of 2014, the statistics department recount the unemployment rate, and 2017 the unemployment rate was 13.9%. Still, the trend starting from, I don't know, 2012 is decreasing dramatically from 17.8% to 13.9%. But the challenge is huge there, and I would like to explain the challenge. Even when we're talking about 13.9% unemployment, in employment, 47% are self-employed and working on the rural area. And they are only create 8% of our GDP. So, and this is the real issue. And when we are talking about this issue, for sure we're working to tackle this issue. But, and the DCFTA facility, as well as the USAID support on the rural area development as well, another import program, what we have from the European Union on the rural area development, SME strategy, which we elaborate with the KfW, as well as all other programs should tackle this unemployment. And what we should get there is that to increase the productivity on the rural area, which then will create even additional unemployment, and then these people from these people, we should create the sustainable jobs. So as you see, it's a very complex issue, and with our friends, we are working to tackle this issue. But yes,
I wanted to bring in some of the other panelists too, just building on both the question of a colleague from OPIC who spoke about, I think specifically, Christian, of the EU, of looking at those models of how you view European business and European small, medium-sized business coming into Georgia and facilitating that type of relationship. We talked about the US, but also China and tackling that and the issue and the rise of sharp power as well in Georgia. No doubt Georgia is in a geographic position as a small country that trade with all of its partners and all of its neighbors is something that's quite important and not always possible when you have a neighbor to the north that uses trade and economics sometimes as a weapon. But I wondered if colleagues want to weigh in on China, but also on SMEs. And I think the OPIC example is quite important of what the U.S. is seeking to do on the ground in Georgia. You mentioned some of the things that USAID is doing as well. But please jump in.
So I'll start up then. Yeah, I think, let me first say that I think one thing you said on the benefits of an open economy is probably not only true for small countries. It's also quite true for bigger countries, and I think we have the experience in Europe of that in particular. Now, on the issue of the small and medium-sized enterprises, as you said, Deputy Prime Minister, this is one of the major challenges, I think, in terms of seeing to that the environment becomes the right one for the development of that particular form of activity. And what we are doing together is to look into how we can, and with quite substantive means. KfW was one example where we work together, but also with the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development, is to see how we can provide the necessary financing, but also the necessary kind of knowledge for SMEs or those who would like to do startups to exploit this new, very beneficial environment for economic activity that is underway in Georgia. And of course, with the aim of both looking into the Georgian market, but also going beyond to the European market. And it's in this context that, for instance, the ideas we have right now on local currency loans is important. Because for a small or medium-sized enterprise, this is a big challenge to get the financing, but also to take the financial risks of foreign currency is an additional burden. And it's absolutely true what was said about infrastructure investments or investments being done by us as by others, that create surrounding around which is beneficial for SMEs to develop. And we have seen that also happening in Georgia. So this is a challenge, but it's something that I think we are very much together focusing on. And I think it's very much also part of the economic model, Deputy Prime Minister, that you have outlined and is going to follow.
I know we're up against time, but I would just add this is a very high priority for us at USAID, specifically in Georgia, as we're helping SMEs understand how to be more competitive, how to understand better practices, how to reach out to other markets. In 2017, we created 2,000 new jobs. So this has been a real important target for us. We understand that giving them the tools and creating better atmospheres for them, for their businesses, for their products is very important. But I would also suggest, as the unemployment issue is a problem, I think the direction that Georgia is going is obviously in a very positive direction. Again, I think it's worth noting that the ease of business, those markers, aren't going to reduce unemployment until you get to that point. So what I'm suggesting is that you've got to change the marketplace first in order to increase the employment. And I think those things are happening in Georgia. And so I think as we move ahead, I think we're in a really good place. And so I'm excited about the opportunities in Georgia.
Thank you very much. If I may to continue. Ma'am?
Well, I would just say that, we've lauded a lot of the accomplishments of Georgia, but on the sort of foreign investment side and welcoming foreign investors, I would say this is a continued everyone needs to continue working on it. This is not, you can't rest on your laurels. The investment climate, that's what the investors will look for. They will look for predictability, they will look for transparency, so we will just continue supporting Georgia in this important work.
I think what we're going to do, because I know we're running up against time, is to give the minister the last word before we break for the next speaker. Mr. Minister.
Thank you very much. So I would like to finalize the answers on the question. So to return to the unemployment, so the last initiative, what we would like to start with the DG NEAR as well. So we would like to propose to start because we have the European External Investment Plan as well as the European Investment Fund there, and we already talked with the European Investment Bank, is to create the Credit Guarantee Fund, which is well known in Europe and is tackle the market failure what we have right now in our country. So there is the several directions where we need to support. We have to support the SMEs, and as it was mentioned, there is an expertise, there is a knowledge, there is a technical assistance as well as is the access of finance. And in direction of the access of finance, the problem of Georgia is that the deep of the financial market is too small. And what we have right now in our country is only the commercial banks, and this is the real problem. And at the other hand, the SMEs does not have enough collateral to provide this collateral to the commercial banks. So, and only the way how we see right now to support the creation of the new jobs is to support the access to finance. So the two directions. So one direction is to support on the expertise, the technical assistance, knowledge providing, etc. And for other hand, to support the access to finance. To support the access to finance, when they learn the lessons around the world, we find that the credit guarantee mechanisms or schemes or funds are the most spread in Europe. And because the Europe right now covers us and it covers, as I mentioned, the instruments, what was mentioned, so I think that it will be very easy to establish with the European Union such kind of credit guarantee funds. And when we learn the lessons, even the additionality, how you should evaluate if the credit guarantee mechanisms or funds are successful or not, nobody is measuring how much lendings they stimulate. Everyone measures how many jobs are creating. So we think that right now we have the several instruments like Produce in Georgia, which helps a lot, but still it's not enough. So we have a lot of programs in my ministry, in the Ministry of Agriculture, and it's create a lot of jobs. So we count around 14,000 new jobs, which we have created only on the program under the Produce in Georgia, but still it's too small. Last year the private sector creates 36,000 new jobs, but still it's not enough. So, and if we will get such kind of instrument, I think that it can help a lot to close this market failure. So there was another question about the...
I think based on sort of timing of some of our guests too, if there's anybody who has any follow-up, maybe on some of these questions too, but I think what we could certainly spend, based on just this topic alone, several more hours. And I think what you were expressing, I think in this point, is the need for even more creative thinking about how the U.S., the EU, and others can support Georgia.
We didn't even talk about land registration either.
Yes.
Which I failed to mention, but I think it's an important aspect of economic development. So.
Yeah. And I think it leaves us, obviously, you can see the great deal of cooperation. I think the opportunities, also the challenges for small countries, larger countries, partnerships, and new areas of investment. We didn't get a chance to talk about new economy, which I think for Georgia is really going to be important. But again, I just want to, I hope everyone will join me in thanking our panelists and our distinguished guests for being here today for this important event. And thank you, USIP Heritage Foundation.
Yes, pleasure.
Okay. Pleasure.
Look forward to seeing you again.
Absolutely.
I am. No. This is about the next speaker. So, good to see you. Elizabeth, thank you very much. Brock, great to have you here. So, ladies and gentlemen, as the panel is leaving, great session. The final speaker here today, and it's very appropriate that the Minister of Defense is the final speaker for a U.S.-Georgia Strategic Partnership Conference. Minister Levan Izoria has been in office since 2016. A challenging job. I mean, a Minister of Defense for a country that's been invaded and is partially occupied has a hard job. Other countries have recently been invaded and occupied, and we didn't learn from the Georgia experience in 2008. So the movement, as the Prime Minister mentioned, from strategic partnership to strategic alliance, I think is an important one. And he also oversees the preparation for the NATO alliance movement. So, so please join me in welcoming the Minister of Defense of Georgia, Levan Izoria.
So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for the warm welcome. I'm honored to be here. First of all, I would like to thank the Georgian Embassy, Institute of Peace and Heritage Foundation for the hosting this symbolic event. 2018 is a very special year in many ways. It marks the 10th anniversary of the Bucharest Summit Declaration, which stated that Georgia will become a member of NATO. It marks 10 years from the August War and the centennial anniversary of the Declaration of Independence of Georgia. The past 100 years reflects a time of trials and transformations as Georgia shifted between political realities and came to once more regain its treasured independence. I want to take this opportunity to honor all those that serve and sacrifice to make that freedom possible. Commitment to duty, strength, determination, and sacrifice of individual soldiers is and will always be the strength of our countries. It makes us strong and inspires us to unify in our fight for freedom. I would like to say a special word to thanks and appreciate the very close partnership and friendship that has been forged between our countries and our armed forces. Friendship is stronger based on common values and interests, and unity is the strength of our partnership. Currently, 870 Georgian military servicemen and women serve caveat-free under the different commands across Afghanistan and will continue to participate until the last US soldier leaves Afghanistan. The US enduring support and assistance has been instrumental for us to provide adequate treatment to Georgian wounded warriors and care for their families through the State of Georgian National Guard Family Support Program. Furthermore, in 2018, we will be expanding our rehabilitation facility in Serovani to provide a regional center of excellence for wounded warriors. We are proud that since 2016, we are providing physical and psychological rehabilitation courses not only to Georgian soldiers, but to the Ukrainian servicemen as well, along with their family members. While we contribute to greater peace and stability, Russia continues to destabilize the regional security and seeks to change the international order. Russia undermines the sovereignty and security of countries worldwide and attempts to subvert and discredit Western democratic institutions and processes. In Georgia, Russia maintains around 10,000 troops in Abkhazia and Tskhinvali region as recognized both regions and as independent states with military, economic, and social linkages to the Russian Federation. threat Georgia is facing on the front line is not only associated with a direct military aggression, but also includes sophisticated so-called hybrid warfare, a new complex approach that offers a fundamental and new tactics in the conduct of modern warfare. In order to effectively respond to global as well as regional complex security challenges, Ministry of Defense of Georgia continues ambitious defense transformation program, which derives from Georgia's Euro-Atlantic integration needs and is fully in line with NATO's focus to further strengthen deterrence and defense posture, boost efforts to project stability in the neighborhood and fight against terrorism, advance the alliance modernization agenda, ensure fair burden sharing. With this in mind, we have been carrying out a comprehensive set of reforms. In SDR, MOD introduced a new total defense approach, which places great emphasis on enhancing interagency cooperation as a way to ensure the whole-of-nation approach and effective use all resources to defend the country. Interagency pillar is the cornerstone of effective planning and implementation, which the MOD routinely tests during annual governmental interagency exercise aimed at deepening interaction and coordination at the strategic and operational level against the hybrid warfare and other threats during crisis and warfare. Various state agencies and individual organizations participate in the exercise. This year, the Dugori exercise will be exceptional. It will be held on highest strategic level with involvement of the Prime Minister and relevant senior level government representatives. In the framework of total defense approach, the MOD implemented important measures to improve reserve and mobilization system. The new system is based on lessons learned from the Scandinavian and Baltic states, given that we face similar security challenges and have to counter Russia's hostile foreign policy. MOD has already achieved significant progress in reforms. I would like to underline our notable progress in enhancing our NATO interoperability and our success in mirroring the NATO standard of spending 2% of our GDP on our defense budget. Additional personnel cost has been reduced from 67% to 53%, and we have increased from 4% to 20.9% of our military budget spending to major system acquisitions, which I must note exceeds the NATO standard of 20%. These improvements has enabled Georgia to purchase the US Javelin anti-armor system, which has significantly improved Georgia's anti-tank capability, contributing to Georgia's potential for deterrence and resilience. It has also strengthened regional security and has made Georgia more capable as a partner in the region and around the globe. Allowing Georgia to purchase Javelin system is a testament of the absolute trust towards Georgia, which we highly value and appreciate. In coming years, as we continue to increase the spending on equipment, modernization priority will be given to developing major self-defense systems, air defense, artillery, engineer and intelligence, cyber, surveillance and reconnaissance capabilities. For the first time, the Ministry of Defense has elaborated a long-term acquisition strategy, a policy document and defense portion, resource management handbook, defining key acquisition principles and financial planning and management framework. We named 2018 the year of logistics to help prioritize multi-year logistic initiatives. We hope to make significant progress in reshaping our logistic structures and streamline our logistic processes to improve the sustainability, mobility, and continuous and speedy logistical support of combat units. As I have mentioned before, Our number one priority is building institutional planning and training capacity that yields a credible, sustainable, organic deterrent capability. Georgia's defense readiness program is the backbone for strengthening Georgia's combat readiness and resilience. It is tailored to the tasks assigned by the National Defense Plan and is designed to rapidly improve the combat readiness of Georgian infantry battalions and to produce long-term systems, policies, and processes to sustain military readiness. Since 2017, we have been working on GDRP institution, laying out necessary institutional foundations, and building the infrastructure and training facilities for the GDRP training. And now I am delighted to note that recently we started GDRP training, and the execution of the program is progressing exceptionally well. After the program is finished, Georgian forces will have the organic capability to train and evaluate units from national missions. To counter complex security challenges and to ensure the effective defense of the country, united and coordinated actions of all government agencies is essential within the framework of total defense. It is necessary to explore and develop new approaches, methods, tactics, and capabilities. Unconventional warfare should become the main principle of the Georgian armed forces. In compliance with SDR and updated National Defense Plan, in 2018 we planned the reorganization of the Georgian armed forces with the aim of establishing brigade combat teams and restructuring of the engineer units, special operation forces, as well as combat support and combat service support units. Main emphasis will be placed on standardization, table of organizations, which will ensure effective and equal distribution of forces and equipment. Stated changes will place the main emphasis on small tactical units capable of execution mission command. In parallel, we are complementing the readiness of the Georgian forces by addressing equipment capability shortfalls. Thanks to the US, as I have already mentioned, GEF received Javelin anti-tank system, and currently the capability is being gradually disseminated in infantry battalions. With the US support, we are also in the process of equipping all infantry battalions with NATO standard small arms, secure tactical communications, and light vision capability. Our goal is gradually to fully transition all infantry battalions to US origin equipment. In 2018, Georgia will continue hosting as well as participating in international exercises. Last year, US-Georgia multinational exercise, Agile Spirit, and Noble Partner were conducted exceptionally well. Noble Partner was the largest field training exercise ever held in Georgia. This year, we plan to build on the success achieved and increase the scope of the exercise even further. This year, Agile Spirit exercise will be conducted in Western Georgia and act as rehearsal for the planned exercise the following year, which will include amphibious operations. Here I must also mention that positive impact of the Agile Spirit on the Black Sea area. Georgia, as an indivisible part of the Black Sea security architecture, remains committed to contribute to the NATO's efforts in strengthening stability in the region. We continue active employment of all existing cooperation mechanisms with NATO and our partner nations, which are fully in line with our reform objectives and further assist Georgia on its way towards NATO membership. The substantial NATO-Georgia package has become one of the key practical cooperation mechanisms which significantly assists defense transformation process and helps prepare our country for NATO membership. We remain hopeful that the NATO Brussels summit will mark an important step, as 29 allies duly recognize Georgia's progress and reaffirms their commitment to our Euro-Atlantic aspirations, we hope to take away meaningful deliverables from the summit. In the end, I would like to highlight the past few years have been remarkable in terms of advancing the US-Georgia bilateral cooperation. The various high-level visits, including the historical visit of Vice President Mike Pence, increased flow of financial assistance, and multiple projects of cooperation vividly demonstrate that US-Georgia relations have become stronger than ever. This is the result of right policy changes and smart reforms, which is crucial for future development of our defense system and armed forces. Such joint efforts complement our ongoing defense reforms and altogether enhance Georgia's potential for deterrence and resilience. For the past 26 years, the United States as a strategic partner has been standing beside Georgia and the Georgia people, safeguarding freedom, security and prosperity, which has been vital for sustainable democratic development of our state. Georgia, as a responsible partner, is dedicated to continue strengthening our friendship and partnership, and I believe this partnership will translate a long-term strategic alliance. Thank you for your attention.
As we draw this conference to a close, I just want to take a moment to thank all of you for being here today and participating in this discussion. I want to thank our panelists for their participation and the insights they brought us today. And finally, I want to thank the Embassy of Georgia and the Heritage Foundation for their collaboration and friendship in pulling this event together. So thank you all very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, we kindly ask that you please remain seated until the official party departs. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we ask that you please exit from the upper level of the auditorium. Thank you.